In PowerShell, commands are called as commandlets, pronounced as command-let. So if you want to get the information about, let's say, a web server, then the command will be get-web server. This is collectively called as commandlet. A commandlet lets you manipulate the features of an entity, which is web server in this case. Let's take another example. In your computer, there are several processes that are running. If you want to retrieve all the processes, then you just say get-processes. How about services? You got a whole lot of services running on your computer. And if you want to get all those services on the screen, then the way to get that is by typing get-service. Probably you want to start a particular service from the list of services. Then the commandlet used will be start-service, followed by the service name. So if it was an English class, then I would just say that each commandlet name consists of a standard verb hyphenated with a specific noun. Now, get is not the only verb that can be used. There are several actions that can be taken on nouns. For example, get for retrieving information, set for modifications, format for formatting data, out for sending output to the file. This list can really become exhaustive. You may ask me, is there a way I can get the list of verbs that can be used? Well, the answer is right there in the statement. You can use get-verb to get all the verbs that can be used in PowerShell. So let's start with our first baby steps in PowerShell with get-verb. Okay, let's get started from where we left. In the previous video, we learned about the usage of PowerShell, what get is, set is, formatting is, start a service is, etc. That falls under the category of verb-noun. We also learned that there's a command with the name get-verb where you can enumerate the list of verbs that PowerShell would accept. Now I have launched PowerShell on my computer. There are several ways in which you can launch PowerShell. I usually prefer going through this box and typing PowerShell, hit enter, and it launches PowerShell pretty quickly, the fastest way of opening it. There are other administrators who prefer going through the start box and then going through the PowerShell like this. It all depends about your comfort level with the operating system, but I always prefer Windows R and then type PowerShell, hit enter. That's quick for me. Now I'll exit from here and just run this command called get-verb on the PowerShell prompt. Hit enter and it shows me quite a lot of these verbs that PowerShell will accept. This add, clear, close, copy, etc. The ones that we demonstrated in the previous video should also be there, like get or restart. It's right here, restart-computer. So we always know that this verb is followed by a noun. We can give it a shot. If we don't know what it follows with, we can just say restart hyphen and then tab. You will notice that the nouns are automatically populated every time I hit the tab on the keyboard. So it circles around the nouns that are available in the PowerShell library. Depending on the usage, you may pick and choose one of them. But with experience, you will always memorize and remember the verbs and nouns and their combinations. So let's say you want to restart a computer. So just say restart-com and tab. The auto-completion feature is really helpful, so you do not have to type a lot, and that reduces the possibility of typographical errors as well. Now you have a combination of verb and a noun. Now let's say I don't know what to type after that. So Microsoft PowerShell has a wonderful help utility built in it, and if you're looking for examples, you can just type -examples after the commandlet. Hit enter and it will give you the entire documentation about how restart-computer can be used and what is the purpose of it. As you notice, there are also examples inside here. It says example 1, we'll restart the local computer. So if I run restart of a computer without any syntax, it will just restart my laptop. Whereas if you want to restart the computers in an array, that's what we use with a hyphen computer name syntax, followed by the server names in double quotes with a comma separated values. Now this goes in an array. Similarly, there are example 3, example 4, 5, etc. Depending on what you may want to use, you would like to first look at the examples, see how it can be used and different ways in which it can be interpreted. It's always a good idea to look at the help documentation. So if you don't know how to use a particular commandlet, help with the example syntax is what I would recommend. At this time, I would do a Control C, clear the screen, and go back to where we started from. Now, we did get hyphen verb to get the list of verbs. Let's look at another example. Oh, there's a start option. There's a stop option as well. On deny, probably we are looking at permissions there, disabling a particular service, mounting a volume, backing up your disk. So there are numerous options to manage your machines. The list of verbs are available here. The combination of syntaxes needs to be figured out by using a hyphen and then tab completing and circling around the options available. And then you do a hyphen example syntax with the help option to see how it can be used. It's more like a manual file in Linux or a help file in Windows. Remember that these concepts will remain the same regardless of where you're picking up the PowerShell commands from. It could be your local Windows PowerShell commandlets or could be cloud-based PowerShell commandlets. These fundamentals always remain the same, and that's why PowerShell is not a scripting language. PowerShell is a framework that can be modified, manipulated, make your own modules, just customize your own programming platform. In the upcoming videos, we'll learn about modules in PowerShell. Called connect-m solve sits inside something called as a module. So if you want to run a commandlet on your machine, you need to make sure that the module is available. And if the module is not available, then we may land up in errors like these. In this case, the user is trying to run a command called connect-m solve service. And the error shows up because your operating system does not recognize the commandlet. This is happening because the module that has the commandlet is not installed or is not available. You can identify the list of modules on your computer by running get-module with the syntax called -list available. Let's see how the output looks like. On the PowerShell interface, I'll run this command called get-module, use the tab to autocomplete, and use -list available syntax. You can also use tab here for auto-completion. Hit enter, and depending on the number of modules you have installed on your computer, it may take proportionate amount of time. So as you notice, the modules installed on my computer are all displayed. You can pick up just any one at random. In this case, I have the Azure module installed. This is the module name, and these are the commands that are available inside this module called as Azure. So since I have installed the Azure modules, I have the commandlets or all the possible commandlets that I can use with Azure. So let's say I want to play around Azure Active Directory. Then I have the commandlets ready in the module called as Azure AD. Let's look at Windows specific commands by scrolling down a little bit further. The Windows Defender, the BitLocker, bit transfer module is there. DNS client module is there, so I can use resolve-DNS name or clear-DNS client cache commandlet to do certain actions on the DNS. There is a KDS, which is a Kerberos key distribution service key on my machine. Similarly, PKI related modules so that I can create self-signed certificates, manage and export certificates, etc. So commandlets are inside the modules. Modules are installed by default on your computer, or in this case, Azure module has been downloaded from the internet. So if you want to manage virtual machines in VMware infrastructure, or manage your VDI environment in Citrix, or play around the virtual machines or EC2 instance hosted on AWS interface, well, these are not the default modules that will be available on your computer. You have to go to the vendor specific website called maybe VMware or Citrix or Amazon Web Services and download those specific modules on your computer to manage them. In this case, I've already downloaded the Azure modules on the computer, and that's why I'm able to see all the modules and commandlets available for Azure. Let's learn how you can install the Azure specific modules on your device. This is required so that you can manage different kinds of resources on Azure. Like, let's say if you want to create a virtual machine or restart the virtual machine, probably add an additional disk to the virtual machine, or create a storage account, or create users in bulk in Azure Active Directory. For every little thing, you may need a PowerShell script. And that's one of the reasons you might want to install Azure specific PowerShell modules on your device. Although I have the Azure modules installed on my computer, and we saw that in the previous video that we ran get-module-list available, and Azure modules were there on my device. But you can install it on your computer by just running this command on the PowerShell interface, which is install-module, like get verb. It's just like verb-noun. Install is an activity that you want to do. And what do you want to install? A module. What kind of module? It is AZ. Install-module AZ. And now because this is gonna modify certain things in your system configuration, make sure that you launch it as an administrator. So launch PowerShell, and before you do that, just right click and run as administrator. Let's hit enter and see what happens. Okay, we got a message that you are installing the modules from an untrusted repository. Now this is on a GitHub repository. AZ is on a GitHub, that's why it says untrusted repository, which is okay. I will say yes and hit enter. This will take quite a lot of time because Azure is not the only module. There were specific modules. Like there's an Azure SQL module, Azure Active Directory module, Azure Storage, Azure Backup. So there are a lot of individual modules within Azure. So make sure that you got the right amount of bandwidth and time as well, and leave your computer for some time for it to install Azure module correctly. Although I have Azure modules installed, it is updating them to the latest version. I'll pause the video for now because I'm sure you don't want to see the progress bar here. It will install anyway, so I'll pause it and resume it once it is complete. Okay, I'm resuming this session because I've got an error here which says that the following commands are already available on this. So it detected that my computer has these commandlets, so why do I need it again? And one of the beauty of PowerShell is that these error messages are self-explanatory. It is not giving me complex error codes like 0x00CB something, right? It's simple, easy to understand, and tells me in English that these commands are already available. And look at this, it also tells me how to solve it. Use -allow clobber parameter if you want to install this module. So making my life simple, I do not have to do Google. The answer is right there. So root cause analysis of your problem is done by PowerShell. It gives you the error message and the solution right there. Sometimes you may get generic messages as well. So at times you may have to go and search on the internet what exactly it means. But most of the times I have seen with my experience that it just shows you the error message in easily understandable language, plus sometimes the solution as well. Okay, let's see what will happen now. I'll pause the video again, and if everything is successful, I'll let it go, or if I get an error, I'll pause it so we can solve it together. Okay, looks like the installation is complete. As you notice, the installation of Azure module from the internet is so easy. All we need is a device with internet access, and that's all. Run this command called install-module with az and then -allow clobber as a syntax. We can verify this by just typing login-azure the tab account, and you will see that all these syntaxes are available. So login-azure rm account will actually log me in to the Azure subscription. Gives me a pop-up. Make sure that your IE is healthy. Usually it takes Internet Explorer as the default browser. So just type my user ID here and the credentials. Okay. So I have an Azure account already, so it shouldn't be a problem. And there you go. So I'm already logged into my Azure subscription, ready to run all the commands that it can accept. So if I just run get -az subscription, yeah, hit enter, it tells me about my subscriptions. I've got a message here, so it's a good idea to run this command instead of az subscription. Just run get-az azure rm subscription, which will give me right information. So anyways, we got the Azure module installed on our device. In the next video, we'll learn how you can create and manage your resource group in PowerShell. In this video, we'll learn how you can use PowerShell to create a resource group. To start with, we will log into your Azure account and then verify if the authentication is successful or not. Then we'll use the following command to create a resource group. We'll also learn how you can retrieve your resource group details with this get-az resource group commandlet. Then, finally, to end with, we'll also delete the resource group with the remove-az resource group command. Let's get started. I've launched PowerShell on my computer, and the first step that we're going to do is log in and authenticate ourselves to Azure subscription. So the command is login-az account. That will give you a pop-up to type your credentials. Okay, so authentication is complete. The next step is to verify if the authentication is done or not. If you notice, I'm logged in as my account and it is a pay-as-you-go subscription. In your account, it may be a free tier or a pay-as-you-go or an enterprise account depending on what subscription you are using. You can get more details about your subscription by typing get-az subscription. I usually type half of the command and then just use tab completion to automatically complete, and that makes sure that there are no typographical errors. So you get the same information here. My account is pay as you go, tenant ID is as follows, and then state is enabled. Good. Now let's go ahead and create a resource group in our subscription. The command to create a resource group is new-az resource group, and use tab, and then you can name the resource group as test or dev or production, or let's say prod_it. So remember that these names are just used for billing purposes so that you know who owns this particular resource group, so you can charge them back. You can add more tags to it later on as well. Every resource group needs a resource location as well, so make sure that we have the location attribute specified during the resource group creation. Let's use East US, hit enter, and give it a minute for the resource group account to be created. There you go, so it is successful. You can also get the number of resource groups you have in your subscription by typing get-az resource group and then just hit enter. It tells me that I have two resource groups. One is for my Cloud Shell, and the other one is the prod underscore IT that we just created a minute ago. Now, if I go to my Azure graphical user interface, I should be able to find the resource group there as well. Let's go ahead and try and see if we can remove the resource group from the console. So I'll clear the screen and use remove-az resource group, and then the name of the resource group is prod underscore IT. This time I do not have to specify the location. I say yes for the subsequent prompts, and then it should be deleted quickly because I do not have any resources in it. So in this video, we learned how you can log in and authenticate yourself to Azure subscription, create a resource group, and then also remove the resource group using PowerShell. You might have seen or used Azure PowerShell commands in the format Azure RM and AZ as well. In December 2018, Microsoft released the general availability of Azure RM module with its replacement and replaced it with AZ module. Now, this new module has several features. This is a shortened commandlet noun prefix which replaces Azure RM. The AZ module ships with backward compatibility for Azure RM module. So the -Azure RM commandlet format will work. However, going forward, you should transition to the AZ module and use -az commands instead of Azure RM commands. Just like PowerShell, you can also manage the resources using Azure CLI. You can download the Azure CLI module from the following URL. All you need to do is just go to this URL and download this executable. Once it is downloaded, installed, you're ready to run the Azure CLI commands. I've installed the Azure CLI executable on my computer already, and I should be able to run the AZ commands on my machine. To find the version of Azure CLI, you need to run az-version here. Hit enter. Then it tells me that the version of Azure CLI is 2.0.47. I can also log in to Azure CLI with az space login command. Hit enter. It will then try to log in with your default credentials. I'll just log in quickly, type my password, and it says you have logged into the Azure. You can close this window or you'll be redirected to Azure CLI documents in 10 seconds. Well, you can either click on it directly or wait for this to redirect. Here you will have a reference of CLI educating us about what CLI is and how you can use the CLI to manage the resources in Azure. At this point, I'll close this, go back to the CLI. It says that we have launched a browser for you to log in. For your old experience with device code, use az login -- device code. Just like PowerShell, Azure CLI also tells me that my account subscription is pay-as-you-go, is enabled, and the subscription that I'm using is as follows. This is my tenant ID. Now we are ready to use commands in Azure CLI to create resources and manage resource group in Azure. Resource Manager comes with several benefits. If you would like to manage and monitor all the resources in your infrastructure as a group, then Resource Manager is the way to go. That means that you can now deploy, manage, and monitor all the resources for your solution as a group rather than handling these resources individually. You can repeatedly deploy your solution throughout the development lifecycle and have confidence that your resources are deployed in a consistent state. You can manage your infrastructure through declarative templates rather than using scripts. You can define the dependencies between the resources so they are deployed in the correct order. You can apply access control to all services in your resource group because role-based access control is natively integrated into the management platform. You can apply tags to resources to logically organize all the resources in your subscription. You can clarify your organization's billing by viewing costs for a group of resources sharing the same tag. And that is exactly why tagging is important. So if you have tags with the name, let's say development, you can identify what is the cost for that development business unit and then charge them back. And this is done per resource group. Microsoft Azure has categorized its service offerings into various segments. Examples of such segments are compute, storage, SQL, network, IoT, etc. These segments have various subcomponents to offer. For example, compute has to offer images, snapshots, virtual machines, and storage has to offer storage accounts, blobs, files, tables, etc. Now, remember that the top category in this case is called as resource provider, and its subcategories are called as resource types. Each resource provider offers a set of resources and operations for working with an Azure service. For example, if you want to store keys and secrets, you work with Microsoft.KeyVault, which will then be your resource provider. Now, this resource provider will offer a resource type called as vaults for creating the key vault. Before getting started with deploying your resources, you should gain an understanding of the available resource providers. Knowing the names of the resource providers and resources helps to define the resources you want to deploy to Azure. So the name of resource type is of the format resource-provider, which can be compute, storage, or SQL, and then slash resource type, which will be depending on what the resource provider is. If it is compute, then it will be images, snapshots, or virtual machines. So that will be what type of services your resource provider is providing. I just wanted to take a moment to show you the resource providers we have in Azure. I'm in the Azure console on the dashboard, and if you go to the search box on the top and type resource provider, you will see something called the Resource Explorer here. Just click on it and it will show you all the providers we have in Azure as on today. This is constantly updated. Now the ones that we are talking about like compute, SQL, IoT, network are just 3 or 4 of them that we spoke about in the previous video. But as you scroll down, you will see a whole lot of resource providers and their resource type if you expand them. So Microsoft.compute is a resource provider and the resource type is everything underneath that. Similarly, you can find resource providers and types if you scroll down to the bottom. Now, there's Microsoft.devices as a resource provider and its resource types will be these. So it will be used in the IoT section. You can find more about it by clicking on it, and then on the right hand side you will see a JSON created for you. Now JSON is a JavaScript object notation which ends with a comma, so these are all comma separated, and in the end there will be no comma because the declaration is complete. We'll talk more about JSON as we move forward, but at this time we are just talking about resource providers and their types in JSON format. So Microsoft provides these resource providers and types to let us know what features exist in each provider. For example, in compute section, it will provide availability sets, disk encryption sets, disk galleries, etc. And when Microsoft has to release a new feature under the compute section, it will just release it as a type under this provider. Sometimes you may need to move resources to either a new subscription or a new resource group in the same subscription. When moving resources, both the source group and the target group are logged during the operation. That means write and delete operations are blocked on the resource group until the move completes. Now that lock means you cannot add, update or delete resources in the resource groups. But it does not mean that the resources are frozen. For example, if you move a virtual machine to a new resource group, an application accessing the virtual machine at that point in time experiences no downtime.